Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. We did a spray art tutorial not all that long ago, got some decent feedback, some requests for more of them, and oddly enough, someone actually asking me for one. So today we're gonna do another one, but as you can see from the array of colors that I have here, it's gonna be a little more complicated. So this painting is actually being done for Derek from Big D Guitars for a couple reasons. One, he kind of asked me for one, and two, to make fun of him because, well, he did it to me. So he's sending me a paint dump and I'm going to send him whatever I end up with after this. I'm going to jump into a voiceover and explain what I'm doing here so that we can use it as a tutorial. You guys can learn the techniques that I'm using and learn about the types of paints that I use for this. Make sure if you're doing this, you wear a mask. That's one of the main reasons I'm going into voiceover. Don't kill yourself, use a mask, come on. You're also gonna need some gloves. If you need a mask, check out the link in the description to Amazon. I've got a couple in there that you can choose from. The full-faced ones are of course better, but for something like this, half mask should be fine. And also, if for some reason you still haven't checked out the Big D Guitars YouTube channel, put the link to that in the description as well. Yeah, Derek's a better luthier than I am by a strong margin, but I bet he can't do this.
All right, let's get into it here. So I start by kind of planning out what I want. I'm doing a space painting on this one, much like the last one that you saw, and I've got a couple different size stencils. So I'm kind of plotting out where I want everything to go, and I just use a little bit of black to kind of dust it on there and mark out where everything is. You'll notice that I've got this footage sped up. A lot of it's sped up at 200%. That's what I'm using right now so that we can get through this quickly, but you can still kind of see everything that I'm doing. Now that I've got everything mapped out, I've got my plan, I've got my stencils kind of figured out here, it's time for me to go ahead and apply some paint. I'm going to put in a couple planets, a moon, and a sun/star type item. So I start by using the two colors to create something that looks a little bit earthy here. I've got my blue and my green, and then I use my texturing item, which in this case was some saran wrap, and then some black on one side and some white on the other to give it a bit of a three-dimensional look. So you've got to identify where your light source is. To some extent here, it's obviously going to be the star, and then create a light side and a dark side to this thing so that you can give it some dimensionality. Now I'm using a different texturing technique on this next one with some purple and teal. I've just used my finger and I've wiped it back and forth, which creates a more streaky type of look like you would expect to see on a gas giant type planet like a Saturn or a Jupiter type thing. Except this was in teal and purple, so not quite. And it's small. Anyway, now I'm moving on to the star, which I'm going to do in kind of a classic red and orange. I'm not throwing in a lot of yellow on this particular one, although that is obviously a good option as well. It's just not quite the look that I've decided I'm going for. I apply the orange kind of unevenly so that I've got some areas that are decidedly more orange than others. And then in this case, I used a piece of paper, more particularly butcher's paper, as my texturing item. So I've got three different texturing techniques that we've used here. And for the star, unlike the other planets, you don't want to create a light side and a dark side because this is the light source. So to give it some dimensionality, I've just done a bit of a dark circle around it and allowed some of that mist, some of that overspray to get on there to create something of a shadow around it. Now I'm throwing in the moon. I'm doing a high contrast one, just some white and some black. Even though the background is white, you do need a little bit in there to kind of assist you in getting some of that texture and mixing the paints up a little bit to create some gray area. I've decided it's too dark, so I just go in with a little bit more white and do it again. On this one, I am going to need my light side and my dark side, which again I do with the black. Put a slightly harsher shadow here because it's a moon. I felt like it. And it looks like I forgot to do my streaky planet, so I come back in and do the same thing there. You'll notice I spray a lot of my cans off to the side first. I recommend that you always do that to just test them out and make sure they're spraying properly before you shoot them at your actual piece. Now I'm putting my stencils on. I've got a few different size things. I've got a yogurt container top, a coffee container top, a Dixie cup, and a spray paint can lid. They all create different size stencils, so it helps me get a little bit of variety in here and make this, well, it's not going to be realistic. Who am I kidding? But you know what I mean. Make it more interesting and make sure that not everything looks exactly the same because that just doesn't really make sense. Now that we've got all the planets in and the star in, we go ahead and we black out the background, and then it's time to get into the interesting part. Now on the one that I did last time, you will have noticed that the moons, I guess, they were the interesting part, but for this one, we're going a little bit more outlandish, a little bit more colorful, as you can probably tell from all the colors that I've got up there. So we're going to use a freehand shield. I've let the black dry. I kind of skipped that. Obviously, you're not going to watch paint dry, so I let the black dry, and now I'm coming in with some white, and I'm creating these kind of hazy clouds that are not really clouds in this case. They're designed, well, at least my thought when I was doing them was they were designed to create kind of that galaxy look, like a dusting of stars way off in the distance, but a little harsher and a little more aggressive. So I go in with this freehand shield. I've torn the bottom of it to create kind of this more interesting pattern and texture rather than using a straight surface. You're going to want to do that when you're doing anything like this. Tear a pattern into it of some description. I haven't gone too aggressive with that. You can certainly tear something more interesting in terms of your pattern, but I'm keeping mine a little bit more subtle, and I'm varying the distance of my freehand shield from the surface that I'm applying the paint to, so I can get a sharper edge if I go closer and more of a misty effect if I hold it further away. Now the same goes for where I spray the can. If I spray the can higher up on the piece of freehand shield poster board that I'm using here, I'm going to end up with less paint on my actual surface, and if I spray it lower, I'm going to get a harsher look because I'm going to have more paint on the surface. One thing to be very careful of when you're doing this is keep an eye on your freehand shield and make sure you're not building up enough paint to drip. If you build up enough paint on there for it to drip on your piece, you are going to be mad at yourself. So don't do that. Luckily, in this case, I managed to bring that up without actually doing it and screwing up my artwork. I've used the straight side there a little bit to create kind of this lens flare type look from what would be a large star off in the distance, or maybe an exploding star or something. I don't know. I don't have a science education. Anyway, I'm finishing off the rest of this white patterning work, and you can kind of get a sense of how this is going to look. But once I've got this put in, I'm going to go ahead and actually put some color in here using some transparent paints. That's a key aspect here. They need to be transparent for this effect to really work the way that it's supposed to. Almost like a candy paint. I've got the Molotov paint cans here. They're Belton, I think, is the company that actually makes them, but they're designed to be graffiti paints. Pretty straightforward stuff. You can order them online, but I think there are actually some really cheap options that will work that are available in like Walmart and that sort of thing in the US. I'm in Canada, so my options are kind of limited. I had to order these guys online. I've made my color selections here kind of based on what the colors of the planets and the star are. So I'm starting around the star with that orange to give that lighter look, and then I'm moving into the red with a little bit of overlap to blend them in. And then I'm going to kind of get into some of the cooler colors, the blues and stuff, as I get further away from this star, which, makes sense. But also it's going to work with the scenery, if you will, because I've got my darker colored planets out there. So I'm kind of trying to create a look that meshes while still only somewhat disrespecting the color science of the whole thing. I won't say the actual science because, this is obviously outlandish and not at all realistic. Anyway, so I move through the colors from my orange to my red. I've got a little bit of pink kind of on the outskirts there. I've got a bit of teal that's going around that star there, which is next to the planet that's comprised partly of teal and partly of purple. And then I move into a transparent blue up top. I'm not going to do a green on this one. I just didn't seem like it would make sense with the colors that I'm working with, but the blue should work fine. And honestly, at this point, we're almost there. You could call it done here, but if you want a little bit more vibrance, what you do at this point is you go in and pull a couple highlights, which means going back in with the freehand shield, matching up with some of the stuff you've done before, and putting in a couple thinner, more aggressive lines to really make this thing pop and give it a little bit of extra depth. After you do this, you're going to come back in with your transparent and push everything back a little further. And again, it's just going to make everything look kind of more dimensional, deeper, like there's an extra layer on there, which there is. So we come back in with the same colors in the same areas here, and don't be afraid to go back over what you've already painted. That's kind of the idea. It's going to push everything back a little bit, darken everything up a little bit, and really allow those highlights to kind of pop out a little bit. Once we're done this, that's it. I'm going to let all of this dry and then go in with my clear coat. Now, this painting did take me a little while. This clip in particular of me doing all of this color work was all filmed in one shot, and my camera, for some reason, only films 10 minutes at a time before it decides to basically shut itself off, even though the memory card's got memory. So, I mean, hey, maybe don't buy a Nikon D5500 if you're planning on doing videos, but the moral of the story here for your purposes is it's going to cut off here pretty quick. So my last couple of steps are occurring here. I'm spraying white paint onto my fingers, doing a little test flick to the side, and then flicking it onto the surface to give us the effect of kind of some stars off in the distance. I'm going to go in and mist a little bit of color in those areas again, just to kind of push those stars back just a touch to make everything make sense, while leaving a few of them white. So I'm not going to get like full coverage with the color or anything like that, but this is it. I spray these on, I go back in with the color, and then the part that you won't see is me going in after everything's dry and hitting all of this with a coat of clear coat to seal everything in and increase the contrast ever so slightly, because your clear coat always tends to do that. Adds a little bit of contrast by darkening up the blacks and everything, making everything kind of seem a little deeper. So you won't see that part, unfortunately, but you will see the finished product right now. Here's what we ended up with. You can see the clear coat added a little bit of depth, like I said, and kind of punched up those colors a little bit. And I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I think the dimensionality of the planets turned out all right. Yeah, all worked out okay. Getting some three-dimensional effect on that star is a little bit of a challenge, but hopefully you like it, Derek. I had fun painting this one. I mean, it's no paint dump, but I hope you enjoy it.
That'll work, I think. So, unlike the last time, we covered how to add some colors here. We covered how to use some transparents. We covered talking about some different sizes for the stencils. And that reflection is going to kill me. Well, anyway, that's what we ended up with. Some interesting patterns and stuff. Sorry, the light hitting this isn't quite working. But anyway, let's see if I can just sort that out by awkwardly bringing you in closer here. What do you think? There we go. So this is just one example of what you can do with spray cans. When you get in here with other kinds of stencils and tools like palette knives, you can do a whole array of other stuff. So if you guys are interested in some more tutorials along these lines showing some of those techniques, please let me know. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, if you did, I would appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe so you can see other tutorials along these lines if you're interested. And yeah, let me know what you think of this. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. I'll see you next time.